Okay. Um, so we've talked about the cultural, we've talked about the economic, we've talked about the political. Now we need to deal with the intellectual. Now this is the argument you probably know. You probably heard this in primary school. Um, this is that concept of what are these people fighting for? What is their belief system? Okay. Um, now, the one thing is, the colonists were not paying much in taxes. They weren't paying much at all. In fact, at the height of all that taxation that the English are trying to instill on the colonists, they're still paying less than 60% of what the average Englishman pays. And they know this. So, what do you see? The rallying cry you see is not, oh, you can't tax us, because they know that's ridiculous. It's no taxation without representation, right? You've heard that term. You've probably heard it 100 times. No taxation without representation. Um, well, here's the deal. Here's where this kind of idea comes from. This didn't come from nowhere. Throughout the 18th century, the 1700s, there was a movement, an intellectual movement going on in England and in France, especially France. Um, and it's called the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment is this time when all these people started questioning everything. They started questioning God to some extent. They started questioning what is the position of man in the world, what is the nature of man. They drag up all these old kind of Greek ideas and they take them further. And the big thing they start questioning is government and the concepts of absolute democracy. This concept that the king should have all the power and control. Um, and they start proposing things like representative democracy, like the opposition to tyranny. Um, and they praise the parliamentary system of the English, the system which the U.S. Congress is based after. You've heard of a lot of these people. It's Kant, it's Montesquieu, it's Adam Smith, it's Voltaire, it's John Locke. Um, Cato's Letters gets in there. All of these kind of figures. If you've taken philosophy, you're probably sick of these people by now. But um, so when these guys started reading all this stuff, they saw a connection between their situation and what all these people were talking about, especially John Locke and Cato's Letters. And then, when we actually, as historians, go in and look at these people's libraries, all the great leaders of the movement, I mean, every single kind of great leader who kind of pushes for the revolution, the wealthier leaders at least, they have these books in their library. All of them. Every single leader of any position and wealth has at least two, if not a dozen, of these books of these Enlightenment figures. Um, so the argument here is that because the elite in the North and the South, the leaders of the revolution, were actually reading this stuff, that it wasn't some cultural, political debate or economic debate, that these people were fighting to create something new, that they truly believed in this thing called the rights of man, the right that every man has life, liberty, have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Yes, you know it as pursuit of happiness, because we'll get to it. Jefferson thought pursuit of property was too uppity. So, anyways, life, liberty, pursuit of property. Um, and so the argument is that these guys were trying to create something new, a new society, a new type of government, free of tyranny. That these were idealistic Enlightenment thinkers. Maybe. Give you one more. And this is the one that your book actually covers fairly well. Most textbooks don't. I actually like your textbook and how it covers this. Um, but it's called the imperial argument. It's the idea that the revolution had nothing to do with the colonists themselves. That it was the colonists reacting to something that they just didn't understand. That the big issues that brought the revolution had to do with the larger issues happening in the world, mainly between European powers. Um, And the first thing we have to understand is that, remember, the 13 colonies, I pretend I have a map. 13 colonies is a little strip, and is completely surrounded by France on almost all sides, with Spain covering it in the bottom. So they're kind of trapped in. They're kind of hemmed in. And in the midst of this, the French and the English are going to go to war 4 times between 1689 and 1773. 4 times. If you include the American Revolution, that is 5 times in 100 years they are going to go to war. They just love to beat up on each other. Okay? So, what you get is a situation where both sides are fighting, and both sides try to pull in Indian allies to help them fight. The Iroquois and the Cherokee are the kind of big two that both sides kind of work with. Well, the one we really need to know with is the 7 Years' War. The 7-Year War goes 1754-1763. You know it as the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War is the name of the smaller conflict that happened in North America of a large conflict called the 7 Years' War that happens all over the world in colonies, including in Europe itself. Okay. Well, the English really decided they wanted to control North America. They wanted to take North America in this war. So they are going to spend tons of money. The problem they find is that the French have been more successful in getting Indian allies. So when they send this huge British military force over, who stand, and this is kind of how warfare works. You stand in a line, the other side stands in a line, and you shoot at each other, and people fall down dead until enough people fall down dead that one side retreats. That's it. That's how it works. Indians don't fight that way. They hide behind trees. They shoot you from behind trees. They ambush you. They don't fight with European honor, as they call it. Well, a lot of the British didn't know how to deal with this. So they enlist all of these kind of colonial ranger units. These guys who've been fighting Indians for generations. They know how to do this. Some of them help train some of the British. Most of them will fight in little units kind of in front of the British. They don't make the difference in the war, but they do hold off the French and their native allies long enough for the bulk of the British force to come over. Well, these colonials are gonna think, well, we're involved in this. We're taking a solid part. We've done our part. That's a problem. Okay, when the war ends, England doubles its territory in North America. Doubles. They also go into huge debt to pay for this war. This is the Peace of Paris, 1763, which is a date you have to know, because there's going to be a Peace of Paris, 1783. So remember that, this Peace of Paris, 1763. The British government goes so far into debt. At the beginning of the war, they were $73 million in debt. I'm sorry, not dollars, pounds. So 73 million pounds. At the end of the war, 137 million pounds. They almost double their debt in the cost of this war. Plus, they have to now manage twice the amount of territory and put forts and man them on twice the amount of territory in North America. So all of a sudden, what happens is, all those taxes we've been talking about, all those taxes that, oh, no representation, no taxation without representation, that all the colonials are getting so worked up about, all the British wanted was to get out of debt a little bit and to pay for the upkeep and the manning of that new land. In fact, when we actually crunch the numbers down, at the most, in all the taxes that the English even proposed, not put in, but proposed, this was never enough to cover the management of that North American land, and even a minute bit of what it cost just to fight the war in those colonies. So they were never asking, England was never asking the colonies to foot the bill for them. They're asking them, the colonies, to help them pay to manage their own areas. Alright, the argument here. With the loss of a common enemy, meaning France is no longer there, the English and these colonists are no longer have something to kind of bind themselves together, to unite behind. At the same time, the financial expense of governing this larger landmass caused a rift in colonial and imperial goals. In other words, taxation. Anyways, these are the 5 arguments: cultural, economic, political, intellectual, imperial. Which one's right? Which combination is right? I don't know. You're going to have to play with that.